David B. Leake was an American soldier from the Korean War who was given the Medal of Honor after killing 5 soldiers, 4 with his bare hands, while giving medical attention to one of his comrades after being shot. It costs 1.5 cents to make a penny, and the U.S. Mint issued $46 million worth of these coins in 2018. The average speed of a commercial airplane is 485 knots, which is 560 miles per hour, 900 km/h. It has only snowed in Cuba once, way back in March 12, 1857. Socialist Karl Marx's final words before he died in 1883 were, "Go away, last words are for fools who haven't said enough." Schools that ditch schoolyard rules are actually seeing a decrease in bullying, serious injuries, and vandalism, while concentration levels in class are increasing. This is because fewer rules requires critical thinking, whereas simply obeying instructions requires very little critical thinking. By the time Donald Trump was 27, he owned 14,000 apartments. Male puppies will let female puppies win when they play, even though they are physically more powerful, to encourage them to play more. The youngest pope to ever be elected was Pope Benedict IX, born in 1012, who was 12 years old. In 1954, a man named John Thomas Doyle committed suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. His suicide note read, "Absolutely no reason other than I have a toothache." Skunks have muscles next to their scent glands that allows them to spray their fluids accurately up to 10 foot 3 meters away. Due to the placement of a donkey's eyes, it can see all 4 of its feet at all times. Ben & Jerry's has a cemetery where they bury all their discontinued flavors. In the novel Forrest Gump that the movie was based upon, Forrest goes into space with NASA, but upon returning crash lands on an island full of cannibals and only manages to survive by beating the head cannibal every day at chess. Instead of using spray cans, some artists create semi-permanent images on walls or other surfaces by removing dirt from a surface, known as reverse graffiti or clean tagging. There's a syndrome called the Tetris effect that occurs when people dedicate so much time and attention to an activity that it starts to pattern their thoughts, mental images, and dreams. There's a book that exists called Everything Men Know About Women that has 100 pages, all of which are blank. There is a luxury hotel in Fiji called Poseidon Resort where for $15,000 a week you can sleep on the ocean floor, and you even get a button to feed the fish right outside your window. The oldest living person on Earth whose age has been verified is Japan's Masao Okawa, who is 116 years old. The richest man in history was Emperor Mansa Musa, whose wealth is believed to have been around $400 billion when taking into account inflation. The distance between Africa and Europe is only 23 kilometers. There are talks of constructing a bridge between the two continents called the Strait of Gibraltar crossing. The over 9000 meme that was popularized from Dragon Ball Z was a translation error. The power level was actually over 8,000. Workers of Amazon's distribution centers can be expected to walk up to 11 miles 17 km per shift, picking up an order once every 33 seconds. Triskaidekaphobia is the fear of the number 13. It's possible for a poisonous snake, after being decapitated for hours, to bite and inject venom and still kill you. According to Stephen Boper, biology professor at the University of Arkansas, snakes are well known for retaining reflexes after death. For venomous snakes like cobras and rattlesnakes, biting is one of those reflexes. Astronomers have discovered the largest known diamond in the universe is a star named Lucy that is 10 trillion billion carats. This white dwarf has a carbon interior that crystallized as it cooled, which formed a giant diamond in the sky. Scientists couldn't resist naming it after the Beatles' song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The Wright brothers achieved flight in a plane that cost roughly $1,000 to build. In the race to fly, they beat Samuel Pierpont Langley, Secretary of the Smithsonian, who failed to achieve a successful flight, despite having $50,000 of government funding put toward his attempts. Midway through the Great Irish Famine 1845-1849, a group of Choctaw Indians collected $710 and sent it to help the starving Irish. It had been just 16 years since the Choctaw people had experienced the Trail of Tears and faced their own starvation. A Roman soldier who survived the 3 of Rome's greatest defeats at Ticinus, Trasimene, and Cannae went on to lead the army that defeated Hannibal. We know him as Scipio Africanus. Rapper Busta Rhymes voiced Reptar from Rugrats. If the sun was scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, then the Milky Way would be the size of the continental United States. Riot control agents, for example pepper sprays, are considered chemical weapons and forbidden in warfare. The most complex eyes throughout the animal kingdom belong to the mantis shrimp, who can manipulate light polarization throughout its entire visible spectrum. That's at least 10x as many colors in our visible spectrum. The 1889 World's Fair in Paris, famous for the construction and unveiling of the Eiffel Tower, had a Negro zoo with 400 black people in cages as one of the attractions. Companies use Elmer's glue as milk in cereal commercials, so that the cereal won't look soggy, and so that they can strategically place the cereal in the bowl. An African tribe in Namibia still wears Victorian clothes, a style of former German occupiers that they've made their own. Speed is now so important in financial trading that a new $300 million transatlantic cable was laid down in order to shave 5 milliseconds off communications between New York and London. In 1967, the Prime Minister of Australia, Harold Holt, mysteriously disappeared while swimming. He was pronounced dead 2 days later, but his body has never been found. IMDb is one of the oldest websites on the internet, and began on Usenet, a long-standing system of internet bulletin boards, in 1990 as a list of actresses with beautiful eyes. Costa Rica abolished its military and redirected the military budget toward healthcare, education, and environmental protection over 65 years ago. The Wright brothers' first powered flight in 1903 did not create public excitement. If people even knew about them, the news soon faded. In fact, they were largely mocked and disregarded until a demonstration in France nearly 5 years later. In 1971, Saddam Hussein imported 100,000 tons of grain treated with fungicidal mercury. The grains were intended for planting, but the Iraqis, unable to understand the English and Spanish warnings or the skull and crossbones image, baked it into bread. Hundreds of Iraqis died as a result. Ali Brash's Of Hyperbole and a Half Comic on Depression is considered one of the best contemporary portraits of the condition by psychologists. In 1795, as composer Joseph Haydn conducted the premiere of his 102nd Symphony, the audience pressed forward out of their seats to get closer to the famous composer. Moments later, a chandelier crashed to the floor where the seats had emptied, killing no one and giving this piece the name The Miracle. Astronomer Percival Lowell believed that he was the first person to observe canals on Venus, but because of a faulty adjustment of the eyepiece of his telescope, he was, in fact, looking at the blood vessels in his own eye. The Fat Buddha statue is not actually Siddhartha Gautama, or Buddha, but rather a different Chinese deity named Budai. During World War II, a Luftwaffe pilot refused to destroy a damaged B-17. The German pilot escorted the B-17 to the English Channel and then saluted the American pilot and returned home. About 40 years later, they were reunited and developed a deep friendship that lasted until their deaths. Each eye of a dragonfly has about 30,000 lenses. The cerebral cortex makes up about 77% of the total volume of the human brain. Between 20–28 million Americans have some form of hearing loss. Every 33 minutes, someone dies in an alcohol-related traffic accident. The word cochlea comes from the Latin word meaning snail shell. The absolute threshold in humans for taste is a teaspoon of sugar in 2 gallons of water. Some people, such as professional perfumers, can distinguish between 100,000 different smells. Some unusual phobias are aerophobia, fear of the air, chromatophobia, fear of colors, spectrophobia, fear of mirrors, odonophobia, fear of teeth, and basophobia, fear of walking.